Testing, testing, testing. We are live. I believe we are live. Can someone confirm on the, if you have like the YouTube channel, you can check the chat. Type in the chat. Yes, make sure we're live. Greetings, everyone. We're going to go ahead and everyone get seated. Hello, Dale. Hello, everybody. We're going to get started here. We've got the stream going. I just want to make sure we're live. That's all. I think we're good. We're good? Let's do it. I believe in you. Fantastic. How's everyone doing tonight? Good? Hurrah. Huzzah. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, YouTube chat. If you're in there, appreciate you all. Fantastic. Yeah, okay, cool. All right, well then, yeah, welcome everyone. This is the International Game Developers Association, Twin Cities chapter, and this is our monthly Game Dev meeting. We are streaming live on YouTube, so please everyone behave yourselves. So go ahead, if you would hit the next slide for me. Bam. So, this is our table of contents. Today is basically running through a quick intro. We got community plugs and announcements. If you ever have anything to announce, feel free to jump into our Discord. It's a very easy link, discord.igdatc.org. And make sure to pick posts in the general chat, and we make sure to give those a shout out. Today's presentation will be concluding the IGDA board election, and then having Joanna May do the Chickensoft story. After that, we'll do a post meeting, which generally we hang out in a local venue for food. We do have, again, a normal time deadline for today, so everyone will be out at 9 p.m. or even earlier, 8:30, depending on the presentation. So I'll keep you posted on that for the time. But that's it. Next slide, please. Welcome. So yes, IGDA meetings are open for everyone. So we aim to be, a safe, inclusive community space for everybody. And you can check our event policies for the safe event policy on the website itself. But, just everyone, be good people, be awesome to each other, guys. Come on. Next slide. And here is our board of all of our volunteers. IGDA is an all-volunteer board. We can't do it without you guys. Appreciate everyone. I officially am on this slide, but this is my last meeting I will be hosting. I'm looking to teach the next week. Oh, you guys are fine. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. But I'll still be here. I will be hanging out. I'll be teaching. I'll still be around. So you'll still see me. I have a lot of fun life plans this year. I just need to take care of myself, self-care. Treat yourself. Okay, next slide, please. And these are all of our other volunteers. These are people who are helping out on the events. We have Dale. We got Dale on the slides. Fantastic. So yes, they run our special interest groups. They even also just generally are very supportive to what our board are all the events we want to help run. We just need volunteers, including you. So if you're interested, please let us know. Next slide. Yes. So our regular schedule of events. The first Wednesday of every month will be Does Play Games. We basically are here at the Nerdery. Everyone brings board games, and we basically play prototypes or just have a good time in general. We already missed it. That was last week. That's fine. Today is the second Wednesday of the month where we have our Game Dev meeting, where we talk about industry. We have community presentations from local members, or we also can do online presentations, hence the Discord setup and the stream. So if you're interested in being a speaker and you're not local to the Twin Cities and you found our channel somehow, let us know you want to speak. We'd love to have you. The third Wednesday, it is canceled for March. I'm so sorry, but it's normally held at, it is okay. GDC, what is that? I've never heard of this. No. Not important. So it's canceled for this week due to GDC. The fourth Wednesday is Minnesota VR HDI. Really cool things happening in person at RAM5. So if you're interested in learning about VR HDI, go check it out. Next slide. Fantastic. Special interest groups. This third Friday is Women's in Gaming. So we have a networking social event in person at Noble Robot, which is hosted by Beth Korth. And then the fifth Saturday, third Friday was this Friday. So this Friday. 2 days. 2 days. I'm not keeping track of, I don't keep track of dates by the number Friday they are. I track them by I'm just saying. Thank you, Dale. This is why Dale's a great volunteer. Thank you so much. This fifth Saturday is the People of Color Get Together, also held at Noble Robot. As you can see, a running theme, Noble Robot, great place. You should check out their games. Cool beans. All right, next slide is Games and Projects channel. So if you have a game and you're local to Minnesota, we would love to have a Discord channel for you where you can post updates. If you're just like not ready to run your own Discord and it's very daunting, feel free to join our community. We would love to have you have a space, just kind of like get to know each other first. And then when you're a full-fledged and ready to run your own channel, we're happy to make you a post in that channel that can direct them to your full Discord on your own. So feel free to just tag us. There's a post a message in the request a channel, which is, request a channel. It's a great place for it. Cool. News, plugs, and announcements. Do we have any announcements? I don't know if we got submissions for them, but if you are in the chat, in the YouTube, or in the Discord, feel free to make a post in those now, and we'll make sure to, emote that or repost it, share it across our channels, all that good stuff. But if there's anyone available here on site, any plugs, any announcements? Nothing? Me? That is correct, yeah. So you make a great point. Great point. Yes, we've been. Yeah. Carl. Oh, that's some cool stuff. Yeah. Ooh. Yes. That's pretty cool. Right. So for those in the stream, basically the shout out was to go watch our VR HCI video from February because it was awesome. But we also have years of content posted on there, so feel free to take a look at our videos, guys. Yeah. Oh, I love the game jam. It was good. Game jam was a great presentation. Okay. But yeah, if that's our only plug. Oh, you have one too? We have the second microphone. Oh, I have the second microphone. Now that I thought about it, I was like, I have a second microphone.
All right, this microphone works even. That's awesome. So I just wanted to plug VGMCon, which is happening next month at the end of April. It's a video game and music convention, and it is local in Minnesota. I forget the name of the exact hotel off the top of my head, but you can just Google it and find out all the information anyway. It's a great time. I went there for the first time last year, and I honestly had a blast. There's video game music, people performing stuff, and the favorite part for me was the talks. There are a bunch of talks, and there is a lot of good information that is oriented around music and video games. So if you're looking for a con to attend in Minnesota, I highly recommend that one.
Yeah, I'll be honest. They had Brental Floss as a speaker one year. It blew my mind. And my favorite thing here is that they have like basically an open jam room where they spin a wheel and it's like, here's the song and with this genre. And they did like a jazzy version of like Chemical Planet one time for Sonic, and it was phenomenal. I loved it. I was just like, this is the fun stuff I love going to VGM Con for. Great shout out.
Got another announcement here. So mark your calendars for the Thursday, May 2nd. It's the semester end Stout Game Expo. We call it SGX.
God, that's right.
Come on out and check it out. There's board games. There's going to be some 2D games, some 3D games. We also will be having a little shared connection over here with this group. So the senior games, the 3D games that are a year-long experience, we'll be partnering up here with the IGDA Twin Cities to showcase those events, or those games too.
Joke's on you. I have it on my calendar already. I was like, yeah, this is coming up. Yeah, the Stout Game Studio is, Stout Game Showcase. It's a phenomenal place to just see what people are making. And I'm just constantly impressed with the students. I wish I had grown up in this generation a little bit, just a tiny bit, because I would have gone to school for game design. It would have been so much easier than me trying this like years ago, right? So, but yeah, no, fantastic shout outs. Love those. Love those. If we have links in the chat, we can check those out too. But beyond all that, is there any other shout outs, any other plugins? I think we're good. Last chance. Okay. All right. All right. Next, our announcements. Is that a second slide for us? Board elections. Okay. So I'm gonna hand it off to Mark. He's ready.
Okay, folks.
Mark.
Oh, can it? All right. Board elections ends tonight. You've been seeing my reminders tagging everybody in the Discord. I'm not apologizing for that all month. Now's your last chance. We have 5 candidates for 3 open seats. If you haven't voted already, not a problem. You've still got some time. You can head to idgatc.org/governance. You'll find 2 links there of import. One is the candidate statements. We asked everybody to fill out a little short questionnaire, and all 5 of our candidates did that, and you can kind of see what their goals are, what the community means to them, a little bit of politicking, and then of course you'll find the Google form, which is the ballot. You have 3 votes. It's not ranked. You just pick 3, and then at the end of tonight, Beth and I, as election judges, are going to count it all up, and that'll be that. So, before we get to our main presentation, we have some but not all of our candidates here. If any of them would like to come up and speak and do a little bit of last-minute politicking, now is your chance. Yes, question.
This is a secret ballot, yet I am seeing on the email form that I have to record my email.
Yes. So it does explain it a little bit. It's a secret ballot insofar that Beth and I are the only people who have access to it, and we're sort of not looking at it very closely. But we do have access to it. If you would like a fully secret ballot, we're all friends here. You don't want to necessarily want anyone to know who of your friends you're voting in against. I totally understand that. We have a solution for you as well. Come to us during the main presentation or at the end of the night while we're counting up ballots, and we'll give you a paper ballot. We just check to make sure that you haven't already filled out the form, and then we'll sort of log you. You can fill out a paper ballot, get it back to us. That is the fully 100% secure secret ballot, but otherwise it's a secret ballot insofar that you do have to enter your email so that there's no duplicates and so that you can change your vote. But again, only the election judges have access to that form. The rest of the board doesn't. The candidates who are currently board members don't have access to that. And that information will be deleted when the election is over. The results of the who got on it, that'll be recorded for our history. But your vote and who voted for who, we're not saving that data. So we're doing the best we can, but there's limitations to how much we can do. I hope that answers your question. Yeah, for the record, Josh Purley doesn't care, but wanted to ask on behalf of others. I appreciate that very much. That's the kind of detail-oriented nonsense that I'm totally into. So there we go. All right, so we're gonna give everybody a couple of minutes. There's no rhyme or reason. You can say what you like for as long as you like. Just read the room. And, there you go.
Well, I'm gonna filibuster up here. My name is Robert Frost III. You can call me Rob. It's just my full name. I have no relation to the poet. But, I'm not really a political person. I'm just more so interested in getting more game audio stuff out there. I professionally am a game audio professional. I've been doing games for almost 10 years. So I started Space Mace with Zach and Tommy, who are not here today. But we released a game called Joggernauts, if anybody has played it in here. It's on Switch and stuff like that. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I feel like game audio is a very weird, strange concept for a lot of people that do games in general, and for us people who do audio in games is also a strange concept sometimes. So I think that it would be really cool to have more, or be able to just give those kind of workshops or find those kind of people to come in and talk about game audio, or just kind of, I would love to do some kind of monthly or bi-monthly thing that is game audio related, and hopefully that would bring other passionate people that want to talk about audio and games together. I I don't really have anything else. This is all coming from deep in my heart. So just know that when you're voting with your heart and your finger. So, and the pointy things. Okay, rambling. Thank you. One more thing. So, yeah. Well, it just reminded me of it because I put the microphone here kind of nervously, and it was about to fall off. I also have like a ton of AV experience, so I could probably be helpful at events and whatnot for actually doing AV or making sure there's no feedback and stuff like that. We're pretty good in here, but just wanted to add that little crouton on the top. Yeah. Okay. Now I'm done.
Thank you, Rob. And that's a great example of the kind of statement we're looking for, like from the heart, what you mean, like don't worry about preparation. We have other candidates who want to speak. Okay.
This is also going to be from the heart and the top of my head. Hello, everybody. I'm Sam Baseman. I am a fresh spring chicken in comparison to a lot of people here when it comes to being a part of this community. I've been here since the last Stout Senior Games Show crossover here. And since then, I've jumped on the volunteer board, been messing around and hopefully making the Discord more legible, and even teaming up with IGDA people at events like Gamedev. I'm very much a big fan of this community, and it has quickly become one of my most favoritist things in the world, just getting to talk with so many other cool, inspiring people who are always doing so many cool things. And one of my big campaign pushes that I would like to make is for more outreach and more exposure to the broader community in the Twin Cities area, because I feel like it has become a thrice a month occurrence that I will run into somebody who is working on something cool in their free time and will say, oh, I wish, I don't know, it's hard to find people who do game dev out here, and I will make eye contact and say, hi, I will send you a link to the Discord later this afternoon with all the info. So that is kind of my big stance, but otherwise, I don't know. I have been a member of the UW Stout IGDA board for a year before graduating, and I've been in other leadership positions, such as working on the capstone game that I presented here last May. So, I don't know. I just like doing things and working with people on making things happen. Yes, thank you.
We have 3 more candidates, if any of them would like to step up. You want me to juggle these? Oh, okay. We have 2, both asking the other if they want to go first. The decorum in this room is just astounding. There you are.
Hello. I'm Trenton. I know a lot of you. I help do Devs Play Games at the beginning of the month, and I help with some of our other events. And that's really just what I'm going to keep doing, whether I get on the board or not. I'm just going to keep helping out. I like helping out on the board currently, and I'd like to continue doing that. My main focus is just making sure that the other volunteers don't burn themselves out, that we're finding different people to help to continue our events. And then I also want to do some sort of outdoor event this summer when it's nice out, like a barbecue or something. That sounds cool. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
I'm L, and I actually did practice this ahead of time a little, so if there are errors, they could have been fixed long ago. I have been a member of this community for about 6 years, and been on the board for 4. I ran in 2020 when it was fairly perfunctory with the intent of trying to get more smaller in-person meetings. And of course, then COVID happened, and that just didn't materialize for understandable reasons. And yet at the same time, here we are 4 years later, and through the effort of a lot of people, volunteer and on the board, this has become an extremely large and successful version of what we had. We have evolved massively past that, and a lot of it was that, you know, pro forma as it was, you know, it brought in new ideas, new information, new blood. And so, you know, I really don't mind one way or another if I get reelected at this point, because I know that the people who have already spoken are also bringing passion and ideas to these things, and I know that I can continue working with the group through the volunteer system regardless. But, you know, I think we can continue to change and grow, and I think one way or another how this night goes, we are going to continue improving. So that's it.
We have one final candidate, but oh, there she is. You kept me in suspense.
Hello, I'm Deanna Grayoak. I am married to that guy over there. But I'm not supposed to say that. I am very truthful, obviously, I guess. And I totally lost my train of thought now. I haven't been part of this community long, but I've been a game developer for a very long time. And it hasn't always been in Minnesota, but I have come to really enjoy this community and have appreciated like being a part of it and helping out where I can, but not like fully committing. So, but I really like it, and I want to help improve things, and I would love to, like, the volunteers for this community are so important, and I want it to be as easy as possible for people to contribute in their own way and like make it as unanxiety producing as possible. So that was one thing that I've thought of recently that I'd really like to try to do if you elect me as board member. If not, I'll just keep helping out where I can. So thanks.
Thank you to everybody for giving those little presentations. I've worked with some of the candidates on the board. I've worked with some as volunteers, some more than others. I'm not going to say anything specific about anybody, but I want to say that every single one of them I know for a fact is coming to it with a lot of earnest intent, and they're all fantastic people. You cannot make a wrong choice. I believe that absolutely sincerely. That's not just me as the neutral arbiter. Like, they're all fantastic candidates. You cannot go wrong. But it is up to you. So please go to the IGDATC.org/governance, where you will find the statements from each of them, which provide a little bit more information, more detail on their answers to some specific questions, but of course you heard directly from them. Use that and any other criteria you'd like to make your choices, which you can get on that same link as well. And I believe that's the whole deal, right? Did I miss any details? Okay, that's that. Okay, the deadline, I'm saying 8 o'clock. It's end of the meeting, but the end of the meeting happens who knows when. So 8 p.m. is what I'm saying, yeah. Sam has a question. Okay, niche question incoming. So rules, Sam is asking about who you can vote for if you happen to be one of the 5 people who these might, no, everyone can vote for anyone. You can vote for yourself. It's like a real democracy. You can also, nudge your friend and say, hey, vote for me. I mean, you can't pay someone for their vote, but you can politic, that's allowed, but we're trying to keep things casual, of course. No rules. Candidates can vote for whoever, folks can vote for whoever. You can vote for one person instead of 3 if you want to. You have 3 votes, you don't need to use them all. If you just feel really strongly about one person and you want to just put that energy there and not distribute it, up to you. You can't vote for anyone twice, but the form will prevent you from doing that. Yeah, I think that's it. Any other questions before we go? Yes? Oh, I think you've identified a problem that I am not aware of. So let me check to see the form responses spreadsheet. If anyone's having any trouble with it, I will go quick and tidy that up. That's supposed to be automatically generated from the form we sent to the candidates, and maybe that got messed up. So the answer to that question is it's probably a problem, and I will fix it immediately when I put this microphone down. Anything else? What's that? Yeah, it is likely the first tab, yeah. Yeah. I'll just double check. I'll clean up any ambiguity there. Thanks for pointing that out. All right, anything else? All right, awesome. You're all the best. Thank you for putting up with my haranguing these last couple months for this process. I'm really excited about how it's going to turn out, however it turns out. So thanks again. All right. Oh, yeah, back to Peter. Peter, you run the rest of this.
Thank you. All right, we're back. So yes, swag, yo, we got merch. I'm excited. I just ordered shirts today. So, but yeah, these are if you really would really like to support us, feel free to grab something off of the link merch.igdatc.org. It's basically like an Amazon group order link. So, yeah, there's a lot of cool selections, lots of cool things. Not enough things on purple. That's all I gotta say. There's more purple, please. I'm just saying. I mean, the color selections are cool. I'm a big fan. Yeah, but I'm just saying more purple, man. Just saying more purple. Not enough purple. You scroll down, there's only, I mean, yes, a lot of them you click, they have color options, they're cool. But one of them actively, I was like, I want more purple. I like purple. That's all. But yeah, great stuff, guys. Yeah, I'd agree with that too. Yeah. Right. And perhaps, I don't know, I hope they don't shrink down too much, but honestly, I like a lot of the, yeah, there is purple in that one, fantastic. I'm just saying, I like the color purple. Let's go purple! Anyways, yeah, but appreciate your guys' support on that, and like honestly, I know we've had some decision and discussion about how we would spend that, but it's basically supporting our SIG, supporting our community. We'll put it back, we'll give it back to the gamers, so. Cool. All right. The next slide is that it? Yeah, open plugs. I think that's pretty much it. We had a wave of first open plugs. If there's things on the Discord and things in YouTube, please let us know, and we'll make sure to get those reshared out. But if anything else, I think we're ready for today's presentation. Come on down.
Hello. Great to see you all. I'm Joanna May. Let me share my screen here so you can see the slides that I was working on. In the meantime, I think I've done my part here. I haven't been coming here that long, but I've really enjoyed getting to know the few of you that I've met so far. And I'm really, flattered that you're all asked me to be up here and speak. So thank you, Beth, and whoever else does all that. I think it's just Beth. So tonight I'm going to be talking about, I guess I'll go big here. Tonight I'll be talking about making it fun to make games with Godot and C#. If you know me, I've probably ranted to you about some of this stuff at some point in my life. And so I run this open source organization, Chickensoft. We'll talk about all that in a second. But yeah, so that's basically the what we're talking about tonight. And then I know that, like, if you've been following the game industry, which I'm sure all of you have, the mid-size to small, game market is really going through it right now. And so I think it's really important to talk about stuff like what I'm about to talk about, because I think when you give people tools to do things, I think a lot of the future games that we're going to see that are going to be hits are going to be from very, like either from individuals or like super small teams. And so since no one's investing in it or in any startup for that matter right now. So I think it's really important to have conversations like this. And also, I've talked with a lot of y'all, and there are some like very smart people in this room. And so I think something's happening here in the Midwest where a lot of you are probably like the future of game development. And so I feel very confident with that. And I feel like proud to know you all. And so that's just my little note on, what's been happening. I feel like I should say something about that. About me, I am an engineering manager at this agency called Very Good Ventures. We'll sell you an app, if you want. I studied computer science at Austin College, which is not in Austin. It's in this little town in North Texas. It's like this liberal art school. I like game development, compilers, developer tools, writing, doodling, electronic music, and playing piano. And I, of course, love open source software. I started coding around age 13. I used this paid programming language called Liberty Basic that some guy made, and it was actually great. And there were some people on some forums, and I was like 14 years old, and they helped me out. It was wonderful. I moved from Texas up here about 1.5 years ago, and then I live with my 2 toy poodles. And then I was an Apple girly, and I wanted to make mobile apps when I was in college, and I was trying to get a job for that, and I was in Dallas at the time, and there wasn't a lot of iOS jobs that would hire somebody who was like fresh out of school, so I ended up doing web development in like custom ES5 JavaScript frameworks, which was a whole adventure that was running on like embedded Linux devices for digital signage, and it was actually really cool, but it was really weird. And then, a few years into working, I ended up going cross-platform with Google's Flutter framework. I've, had the, pleasure of working with Toyota, Google, BMW, Betterment, Charles Schwab, U.S. Air Force, household names. If you work in tech, you probably work with names like that. And then, done everything from like those embedded digital signage things to like front-end web. And then, by day, I'm doing engineering management, which I love, and we build, we specialize where I work at building apps, like with a lot of quality. We put a lot of love into our work, and we're, really proud of what we do. And so while I've been at this job for the last few years, I got the, I had the good fortune to work with some people who were really, influential with Google's Flutter framework, and they taught me a lot of stuff about how to architect apps and how to make these code bases that large enterprises could use that didn't suck to work on. And, I really respected them, and they were like these Flutter influencers, and they'd do talks all over the world and had big Twitter followings, and they were just cool people. And so I'm like super grateful that they spent the time with me and taught me that. Because a lot of what I've been trying to do is basically take those things that I've learned from my colleagues and friends and sort of port that over into game development. So you'll see that thread running through this, conversation. So Flutter is this tree-based UI system built on a C++ rendering engine using a modern managed programming language. And this is just going to come up again later. It's basically what would happen if you had a front-end framework and a game engine. They had a baby. It's very designed for performance. It sort of diffs the tree every frame as needed, and then re-renders the widgets. So if you've used React or Vue or anything like that, you know what I'm talking about. Flutter kind of actually delivers on Java's promise of write once, run anywhere, and a lot more of a pleasant experience than Java was. But it's not so great for games currently. Now, that's kind of true. I have some colleagues who are working on the Flame engine for Flutter. But, compared to all the other tools that have been around a while, like Flame is kind of in its infancy. But I really respect what they're doing. I've gotten to use some of their stuff lately. It's actually been a pretty good time. And so, go look that up if you're interested. At work, over the years, we've been building apps a certain way, and I swear this is relevant. We use modular layered code. You don't want sibling dependencies in the same architecture for the most part, and then you don't want to have all these dependencies that depend on everything else, because if you were to graph out your architecture, you'd see that there's all these cycles, and it just makes it very hard to reason about. We use feature-based architecture. We'll talk about that in a little bit. We have a very opinionated approach to state management, And we provide dependencies at the tree, and then any particular widget in the widget tree can just go up the chain and look for whoever's providing what it needs. It's just simple, and it just works. I've always wanted to make games growing up, and I didn't have access to a console. My family was kind of, they weren't sure about video games, what it might do to one's soul, and here we are. And as a result, I'm quite bad at video games. But when you're not allowed to do something, you really want to do it. And so I was like, well, I'll just make my own games. And so, as a young teenager, I ended up coding. And all of you who like puzzle games are crazy, because that stuff could just be brute forced, or just walked with an algorithm. Like, that's way too much brain power. So yeah, smart people. But anyway, I made my first video games, around age 14, and then around 17, I was trying to learn C# and XNA. That was like my first exposure to object-oriented programming. And then I got busy with life, college, and working for a long time, and but then began revisiting game development a few years ago and got really, really into it. I ended up using Godot, as we discussed, and then now I'm running Chickensoft, which is the open source, like grassroots C# and Godot community. And then we made a bunch of stuff along the way. Also, feel free to interrupt, ask questions, heckle, dissent, whatever you feel is necessary. I think it'll make it more fun. Yeah, thanks, Josh. This is what I've been up to lately. I haven't made it very far. I keep getting distracted with art. I really like making art. And so I'll spend a while making a 3D model, or I'll spend a while, doing whatever, building a funky looking house. And so that's kind of what I've been up to. It's supposed to be an action RPG someday. Right now, you just run from chickens. And then Chickensoft, open source organization. We want to make it easy. Sorry. We want to make it easy for people who are trying to get away, from Unity, or want to make games in C# to have an open source alternative that doesn't suck. And so if you're trying to build games like in C#, you've got a number of options, but most people are just going to pick Unity. And so we want to create a place for people to be like, oh, there is an alternative. You don't have to use Unity anymore. And that's something I believe, and I think is generally true. I also, I've created a bunch of projects for Chickensoft, so they all live on the Chickensoft website, which you can find. And then we have a bunch of people in the community now. It started because I wanted, to make games with my friend, and he's really good at designing games, and I also think he's watching live. So sorry, Josh, but I picked the name Chickensoft just to annoy him. And I don't think he realized that until he saw my slides earlier when he was proofing them for me. And of course, Google and pretty much everything wants to always correct it to chicken shit, which I think is, it keeps you humble. So yeah, anyway, we never got around to making a game. It was actually supposed to be, the Run from Chickens game. And so he still helps me do it when I'm not procrastinating. And he's, every time I take a break to work on art or work on a tool, he thinks I will never actually get back around to the game. So joke's on him. I have been slowly working on it for about a year now, but we'll see. Thank you. Thank you. When I was first trying to get into serious game development as an adult, well, there's a lot to unpack in that. But, I was trying to use SpriteKit, which is Apple's, game stuff. And it's pretty bare bones, but they have some cool stuff. And then I tried using Monogame. When I was, 17, I had a Zune HD. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I thought I was really cool. Or I guess looking back, it was really cringy. But I had a Zune HD, which was the touchscreen Zune, Microsoft's iPod Touch, and it was really limited in what it could do. But it was really nice, and you could make games in XNA with C# and load them onto your Zune, and it was a good time. And so for me, who's learning all that stuff, I had a blast. And then a few years ago, I tried Monogame, which is the open source rebirth of XNA, and I was like, wow, you just kind of have to code everything. And I was like, I'm doing this in my free time. I'm there's no way I'm going to get anything done, and there's no way I'm going to implement like isometric tiles with depth sorting, because that's apparently what I wanted to do. So I opened up Unity, and this is going to sound really terrible, but I did not like how tiny the buttons were. And so in my professional judgment, I just was like, no, I can't do it. Why are people using this user interface? I just completely dismissed, the world's most popular like game development tool. So I'm so sorry, all you Unity aficionados. I just dismissed it on how it looks, which is terrible. And then same thing with Unreal. I didn't even download it. I just looked at the pictures and thought the buttons were so big and cheesy looking. And I was like, people are using this to make games? And I hadn't been using, professional stuff like professional game developers. So I was just like, who would put themselves through this? But so I didn't like. Yeah, so Godot. So the question was, thanks for that leading question, Mr. Gaff. But yeah, no. I did totally dismiss these great software packages on account of buttons being too small and buttons being too big and cheesy. And that was my actual reasoning, and I'm sorry because it's really like dismissive, and I now know better. But yeah. I thought Godot was the Goldilocks of game engines. Everything was just right. And I spiritually connected with it. And I've been doing Flutter, and everything's a widget node in Flutter, and everything's a node in Godot. And I was like, wow, it's all so abstract. I love it. And so it's like when you have a system that's so abstract, that's just purely node-based, and like in Godot, a collection of nodes is a scene, and you don't have prefabs or anything like that in a sense. And so when you have such an abstract system, you can draw the boundaries wherever you want as an architect and come up with opinionated programming practices. And so as somebody who works at a company where we have very opinionated practices, and all of our code for every app we build all looks very similar, and it's easy for someone to get up to speed in, and we always use the same tools every time, and we always like have 100% test coverage, and we just do this, I was like, wow, Godot is like this perfect sandbox where I could take all those practices and come up with a Godot version of those ways of doing things and make it really easy to make games, or theoretically anyway. And so I was in love with it. And of course it was open source, which was, what I was really looking for, I think. And so I started, participating in the Godot Discord and everything. And I was talking to people, getting help with my little projects and stuff that I was doing and trying to go forward with. And there were some really smart people on there. And they stopped to help me out, and I got to be kind of friends with them. And I realized that on like the big Godot Discord that has like 90,000 people or whatever, there's just one channel for C# stuff. And if you've ever used MS Build, you know that it can be very lengthy conversations to figure out how to do anything with it. And so if somebody else was already getting help, you felt like a jerk for sort of hijacking the one channel for it. So I was like, okay, well, let's create something for the people. And so I started inviting people very aggressively into Chickensoft, so much so that I got slapped on the wrist by the moderators of the other Godot Discord. And so I was like, okay, well, I guess I got to play by the rules. And so I started, marketing traditionally, website, that sort of stuff, posting on Reddit, what have you. And I just repurposed Chickensoft because it was this empty Discord for a game studio that me and my friend had, and it was just sitting around doing nothing, and it already had an icon or a logo, and so I was like, well, why not? And so I'm stuck with the name. And then, I didn't like Unity. The buttons were too tiny, and I was fascinated by what Godot and C# could do, and I didn't feel like anybody was using that combination of stuff, and I was like, wow, the world's sleeping on this. So I wrote this little blog called It's Time to Make That Indie C# Game in Godot, and I think my argument was more or less like, oh, look, you don't need Unity. There's something else out there with a great visual editor that integrates okay. And, and if you don't need the asset store, then you're fine. And so that's what I was trying to say, and I was really excited about it. But that was not, it did okay, actually, even though that was not the most compelling pitch. I posted on Hacker News, which is Y Combinator's, site for people who are too pretentious for Reddit. And Yeah, I know, and I like going on there because you'll be like reading the comments and you'll see, oh, this guy's created this very popular programming language. You're like, I know who that is, and then the next comment is somebody saying, why that person's wrong, and it's fascinating. But it's just weird Reddit, and it did well, and it got some hits on there, and so that got a bunch of people. And so we got a bunch of people joining the Chickensoft Discord, which was like 30 people. It just went to like 130 people in like a day or two. And so all of a sudden we had like a very small community going on. And I was like, wow, there's a bunch of people who want to make games with C# and Godot and open source stuff. And so that was like kind of kicked us off a little bit. Usually, communities have to have some like lucky meteor strike to get started, or some sort of viral stuff. And that was, I think, the kick for us that got us going. And I didn't really know what I was doing. It just was kind of happening. And I had no idea in 2022 that Unity was about to, make my marketing really easy. And so it's all listed out here. This is a screenshot of a blog I wrote, just listing their crimes. And, they tried to remove their own forums. Adware company, they're having a hard time, and I feel really bad for all the employees because they don't deserve that. And and they couldn't finish their own game, or didn't want to, and then they tried to make everybody pay for it last September. And it turns out that whenever they do something like that, our website gets a lot of traffic. So you can see that we were supposed to get 300 people, and we got 5,600 the day they announced the installation fee. So I guess people were like, well, how do you use Godot and C#? And I've been kind of posting content about that, and so I guess they found it. And of course, the Discord's now like 1,200 people, and it was like 300 last year. So a lot of that is from this. So yeah, don't screw your users over. But anyway, I already covered that. We grew. Anyway, Godot, world's leading open source game engine. It raises a lot of money every month, which they use to spend on development. A lot of the developers are in countries where it's not as expensive, and so they're able to fund a lot of development with it. Got a bunch of people on Reddit, almost 200,000 people, 100,000 people almost in the other Discord, etc. Works with GD script, C++, C# out of the box, and then at any given point there's thousands of pull requests open. People are trying to contribute and make this thing great. And so when you look at Godot, which is not backed by any one single well-funded company, and you look at something like Flutter, which is Google's baby, and they both have thousands of pull requests open. And it's like, wow, this is done out of passion. So there's something happening here, right? I mean, obviously, there's tons of people that know this. And it's got a great, they rewrote a lot of stuff for Godot 4, so it's now a really happy time in a lot of ways. I'm not the person to enumerate all the awesome stuff about Godot. I'm really not qualified, but yeah, there's some people doing awesome stuff, and they can, talk about it. But Godot is essentially an open source, tree-based game engine built on a C++ rendering engine that integrates with a modern managed programming language, which is, in a lot of ways, what I've been doing with Flutter, except this is just the game engine version of that. And so, when you keep learning new tech stacks because your companies ask you to, you end up, you squint a little bit, and all these tree-based rendering engine systems all start to look the same. And so I thought, I wonder if I can take these architectural practices that we've been using to build apps at my company, and with the colleagues there that had come and gone that taught me all this stuff. I was like, well, can we use those same practices and apply them in a game engine? It'd be really nice. And I didn't have this idea all at once. It sort of happened organically, because I would sit down to make a game and be like, oh, I need to get a dependency. How do you do that? And I have to come up with practices for that. And so I thought back to how we were building stuff and having a really good time doing it with Flutter. So I was like, well, they're both tree-based systems. There's a lot in common here. Maybe I can figure out how to, finagle it to be similar and come up with what, would be, make sense with Godot. And I was doing this knowing that a lot of people online, if you read r/Gamedev and stuff, people are like, yeah, don't worry about the code quality, just get the game done. And that is very true when you actually have money that you're burning and need to get a product out, which was not true for me, right? And so I was willing to take my time and, not have to worry about money. And then the caveat to that statement, though, is that code quality often determines whether or not you can get a product finished. I have seen a lot, like in the app development world, at the various jobs I had before I got to the current company I'm at Very Good Ventures. The other places I've worked, I have seen products canceled because the code was so bad it could not be salvaged. So I am a big believer in like making good stuff. And I think if you make good stuff, it's a lot easier to finish your project, which is easier said than done. And then this is a little chart I threw together a while back, but architecture is one of those very opinionated things, and so feel free to disagree with me and even make a rebuttal speech. But I took this, inspiration from Martin Fowler's article, "Is High Quality Software Worth the Cost?" Great read, by the way. And so if you look here, you'll see that if you just take, a haphazard approach to code architecture and just throw whatever scripts in your game, and as time goes on and you want to add more features, the difficulty of adding a feature will increase, because what happens is, if you look at it as a graph, you have so many things all interconnected that you have to untangle the graph, figure out where to rewire everything, and put something in to connect it with all your other systems. And so as time goes on and the number of systems increases, if you have sibling dependencies like that, and you're just willy-nilly, throwing code together, it will get harder and harder throughout the project to add code. And I've seen this, with just normal software, and I've lived this with many personal projects. Whereas if you just put a little thought into what you're doing, which most people do, it may take some more effort up front, but the difficulty of adding new features as time goes on should kind of plateau for the most part, in theory. And so this is my little joke graph that depicts that idea. And so the question is, well, if you're going to come up with opinionated architecture practices, like, how do you know if what you're doing is good? And you need to talk to, philosophers for that kind of information. And I don't even think they agree on it. I went down a rabbit hole when I was making that slide, actually trying to figure out if people had a definition for goodness, and they kind of do. But anyway, I got spoiled with Flutter's amazing development tools. So the Flutter people at Google, they had the ability of looking back in time and seeing all these development systems people hated, like Java, and all the ones that people loved, like Delphi and all that other stuff, and these little, things that had popped up, come and gone. And so they're like, well, let's make developer tools that are really nice, and they're like a joy to use. And so I was like, well, as soon as I sat down, to play with Godot, I was like, well, a lot of stuff that I rely on and expect to just be there on day one, because I've gotten spoiled, wasn't there. And so I kind of looked around. I was like, okay, so what am I going to do? We were able to get, at work, at Very Good Ventures, we always get 100% code coverage on our apps. I know this sounds like a sales pitch, and we will sell you an app if you want. But we're able to get 100% code coverage, and it's not a lot of work. Once you know how to write tests and your code is structured a certain way, it's just very easy to just crank them out. If you're using AI autocomplete stuff, it'll often just finish the whole thought for you. And so there's a lot of value in having that for apps. And so it was easy to do something that's normally considered quite difficult. And so I was like, okay, that's my definition for good architecture, is whether or not something can be easily tested. I don't care if you actually test it, actually. I think that's the next slide. I don't care if you, actually test it. It's just, can it be tested? And that's where I think, because if you could say yes, that means you've made your code modular, you've detangled everything, you've made it where it's easily nicely structured and everything. And so that's my criteria essentially for if an architecture is any good, is can I write a test for it without too much trouble? And so if you're not super familiar with software testing, it's actually quite simple. Here is a real life example of a test. If you look at that first one up there, it's just simply testing that when the player starts off with a 0 velocity and you tell it to jump, that the next state the player should be in should be the jumping state, and we should change the velocity. And if you run that test and you collect code coverage, is what it's called, you can see that the code you're actually testing that handles the jump input has turned green, and the code you haven't written a test for is still red. And so that's what code coverage lets you do, is basically see which parts of your app you've hit and written tests for. And you guys probably do this all the time for work or whatever else you have passion projects. And so it's pretty simple, really, when you distill it. And unit tests should not be, taken too seriously. They don't verify that your program does what you want it to. They verify that your code does what the code says it does, which is not that useful. But it does force you to show your work, like in algebra, when your teacher's like, you can't just give me the answer, you have to write out how you got it. That's how I kind of view unit tests. They're a way of showing your work. They act as documentation, because if you've written tests for the stuff in your code, you know how to use your code. And they force you to decouple stuff. If you've ever tried to write a test for something, but it's tightly bound to another object, like I need to inject that as a dependency so I can mock it or fake it, then your code is not correctly decoupled. And so that's kind of my opinion on that. And my company and all of us, we're all kind of self-righteous about testing and stuff, so we're kind of insufferable sometimes, so take that with a grain of salt. But just in terms of the other types of tests, just real quick, there's no tests, or we don't have time, it's not possible, too hard. I've usually just heard this out in an industry when people, don't know how usually, because once you know how, you kind of see the value of doing it and where to do it, especially once you've had a little practice with it. And then with, unit test verifies the code does what it says it does, integration test verifies the code does what you think it does, and then end-to-end, what your product manager thinks it does, and then you actually have a user play with it or, run it to see what, their expectations are. And then I'm not suggesting actually doing tests for games, so don't take that the wrong way. I'm just trying to explain tests as this sort of platonic ideal of like, if you can write tests, it's good, and you'll have a good time, right? And so don't take this too far. Games probably don't need 100% test coverage or anything close to it, if at that, unless you just really want to. But like I said, it's about the ability to get test coverage. So while doing all this, I was, breaking the advice of, build games, not tools. And I was like, well, I'm going to stop and build a tool every time I need something. And boy, was that a lot more involved than I thought. And so I personally was like, I see this advice, I'm not going to do it. And so I deliberately broke this advice and then paid a price, because I've been doing this for 2 years now. But I do know that if you're going to make a tool, you got to use it yourself, and you don't just dream up a tool that you don't need. So I'd only stop and build a tool while I was working on a game, and then when I needed something, I would put it on pause and often never come back. But I would finish the tool, so at least something got done. And so I produced all these really stunted tech demos that didn't get very far. And working on all this is kind of what inspired all the tools that I've been making. So this was back with SpriteKit, actually, before all this. The reason this project never got anywhere is because I spent forever trying to learn pixel art, and then never did anything else except parallax motion. And I did really like how SpriteKit does state machines, though. That was a big inspiration for some of the stuff I did later on. But yeah, it's nice, but yeah, you can... Oh, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. You all are too nice. This was a fishing game. You can see I got real far. This was one of the first Godot things I did, and so I didn't know how to structure anything, and me, who's come from this company where everyone's super opinionated and they tell you exactly how things should be, and the principal architects are super good at their job, and I was like, I don't know what to do. And so I spent a while doing IK motion to do a fishing line, because I thought that would be kind of fun. And then I made a boat go left and right, when you press the arrow keys or whatever. And that was about it. And then I worked on this tank demo, which was from the Kids Can Code series. And boy, are those some smart kids, because they're talking about figuring out normals off terrain. And that was not something, I'm not great with math, and so I was looking at their tutorial and going, wow, kids can do this. So I was very impressed. But then I just was trying to implement networking with Steamworks, and it's probably very hard to see, but there is a very tiny number on there. So when you're dragging that slider, the other instance of the game that's in the same lobby is using Steamworks to, sync those values and all that stuff. And then I implemented the whole lobby joining system and everything, and I learned how not to code menus because the way I was doing this was very messy and very difficult. But I did learn, some stuff about Steam and integrating that, and then never actually did anything but make the tank move. I came back to the fishing game with more art and never did anything else again, so I guess this was just an art project. Fascinatingly enough, the fishing rod, you click once and it winds up, and you click again and it plays the other animation. And I knew that if I actually built the rest of the fishing game, it might need to do some more things too. And I started thinking about state machines, and because the way I was doing it was really messy and not working. And so it got me thinking about that at least. So I started noodling on that, and all this was going on in the background. I was making tools, I was doing other things, and trying to get all the smart Godot C# people in one place. And so a lot was going on, but yeah, I kept getting distracted with art. And then I tried, I was like, okay, I'll make a racing game. It's just physics-based. It can't be that hard. It is non-trivial. And, vehicle physics, if you're going to roll them from scratch, I did not want to use wheels. I wanted to use, thrusters sort of floating the car up. And so I started working on, ground-to-corner intersections with the raycasts. And then I built all these visualizer scripts so I could see the vectors, so I could see what I'm doing because I'm not good at math. And so it was kind of cool. I could throw the vehicle around and offset the center of gravity, and that was all I did. And then I came back to the fishing game. I know. I just can't quit. And this was my third attempt. I was like, okay, what if we, did fish breeding? And I was like, well, it can't be that hard to morph polygons. But it turns out if you're trying to morph concave polygons, it's also non-trivial. There's actually this very advanced paper on morphing concave polygons, and someone has the Holy Grail algorithm, but I was not smart enough to be able to read the paper and then implement that. So, I'd probably pay a lot of money, if somebody wants to implement that, who's smarter than me, because that would just be so cool. But you could see, using just some naive winding algorithm tricks and stuff, you can get kind of tolerable results. Because we're morphing, the anglerfish into the swordfish and the hogsucker, I think is what it's called. I learned a lot about fish doing this, which is way outside my skill set. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And also not a game, just a 2D drawing exercise. So every time I was working on something, I was running into all these issues, right? Like, how do I, test the code that I want to take? Because, okay. Backing up, so I was making project after project, and these were they looked tiny, but they were actually a lot of work. And so I was making all these different projects, but I was coming up with code I wanted to share between them. And so I was like, well, this code is tied to the game engine. You can't run it outside the game engine. It won't work because of the way marshalling is handled and stuff. And so I was like, I need to be able to write tests for the reusable part stuff so that I don't, have crappy tools. And so how do you do that? And then the other thing was state machines. How do you find a consistent way to do that, with C# and Godot and all this stuff that plays nicely and doesn't result in a lot of extra boilerplate, or at least not boilerplate that's not useful. And then, how do you separate your scripts, from your actual game logic? Everyone says you should. And they're probably saying that because it's easier to, test and simulate stuff that way. But I couldn't actually figure out how exactly to accomplish that. And then how do you get the things you need, with your dependencies? How do you inject dependencies? How do you treat that? And how do you keep from overcomplicating it? Because for some reason, C# developers have just gone nuts with dependency injection. Because to me, it was just very simple. You just pass stuff in a constructor. But over in C# world, they have buckets and containers and all this crazy stuff that they're doing in enterprise. And I don't know what y'all are doing with it, if that's you at work. Maybe you can fill me in, but I cannot wrap my head around why it's so complex. Yeah. To justify more development time is the answer. All right. Thank you, Andy. Okay, yeah, so it felt overcomplicated to me too, so I'm glad I'm not crazy. And then the other thing that I ran into with Godot requires you to inherit a class when you want to create a script for a certain type of component. So unlike in Unity, where everything is just componentized and you just slap it on something and it's composed, there's a little bit of inheritance at play in Godot. And that's fine, but sometimes you want mix-ins where you want to essentially add state, where default interface implementations, all that just doesn't cover it in C#. C# doesn't have an actual mix-in concept like Dart or JavaScript and all the stuff that I'm used to does. And so I was like, it'd be really convenient to make these scripts easier to test and stuff if you could just add state directly to them. And so I kind of knew all the answers to all these questions with Flutter, and I knew that the way we were doing things was really pleasant. We had very smart people. I was very fortunate to learn from them. And so I was like, surely you can do it with Godot. And I also don't want to live in a world where you have to build games with proprietary stuff, or any kind of software for that matter, because, you know, I think probably someone quite famous, I don't remember who said it, but someone said information wants to be free. And it's especially true with development tools. Things like game engines and Blender, they are these large projects that span this huge domain, and you need the world's expertise constantly contributing to it, or it just doesn't work. And so, you know, with game engines that just have layer upon layer of abstraction and huge detailed stuff, like I want that to be open source, that's just the hippie in me. And, you know, I was trying to follow the Boy Scout rule, you know, leave this world a little better than where you found it. And so I was like, well, I really want to, you know, take on Unity. Not that they know I exist, but it just felt fun. And it seemed like the right thing to do. So I was like, I got to try. I made this the other day, actually, and tweeted it. But this is my little joke on Maslow's hierarchy of game development. I'll go ahead and read it off a little bit. Physiological needs at the bottom, that's your code environment, you know, code style, automatic formatting, shared IDE settings, whatever. Then safety and security, your project structure. Then love and belonging, state management. It's starting to get quite tricky by the time you reach state management. It's kind of okay, like if you've done, you know, if you have any experience as a software engineer, you can probably figure out the bottom two pretty quick. And then you start getting into state management, and there's all these different opinions and ways to do things. And that's actually, well, I don't want to be a code fascist, but sometimes having too much freedom is bad because then you've got different ways of doing things in the same code base, and that can really throw off your junior engineers. And like most of my job is like training junior engineers, and so I want to make it easy for code. I don't want to have to stare at my code and try to figure out what I was doing or what someone else was doing. So I want it to be simple and consistent, and that's something that, you know, my company has really been good about, is consistency with the way we engineer things. And so that's like really, you know, become a core part of me as an engineer. And then serialization, you know, I haven't actually hit serialization yet with Chickensoft's tools. I'm actually working on that right now. And then you've got things like networking and doors and leaving early access, and it just gets, you know, impossible from there. So what have I, you know, been working on with Chickensoft? So the first thing is, while I was making stuff, you're like, you got to get your code environment set up. And so while kind of learning C#, and GitHub Copilot's great because it was like sort of teaching me colloquial C# of like filling stuff in. I was like, oh, you can do it that way. And so I would keep this editor config file, and I would just kind of come up with my own style that didn't result in a lot of extra verbosity required to play nicely with the engine. So I would just maintain an editor config and use that and share that across my projects. Eventually just made it a package. And then because I was spinning up so many of these little test projects and learning things and making toy projects and sandboxes and then just discarding them to quickly learn things and try things, I ended up doing that so many times and making so many packages that I just made a template for spinning up a empty Godot game with C# stuff and all the IDE settings for VS Code and the editor config and all the stuff that you would just expect to just be there. And so I did all that boring stuff and some basic CI/CD checks and things like that, and same thing for a package as well. This actually happened pretty recently, and the presentation is not in chronological order, but it is in sort of, you know, topical order. So not that long ago, I was working on this tool called Godot Environment, so that you can install Godot from the command line on Mac, Windows, and Linux, because what happens is the moment you want to collaborate with somebody and you need like an environment variable set up, otherwise you can't use VS Code because the launch configs expect Godot to be in different places and stuff. And so like you want to have your symlinks and your environment configured the exact same way, and you also want to automate it because the Godot people are absolute maniacs and they release Godot updates constantly. You'll see like dev releases happening almost daily and betas happening almost weekly. It's crazy. And so to keep up with that, and since I was on the bleeding edge and using all the latest stuff, I was trying to keep up with that. And then I had a friend who's watching, and he's not as technical as me. He's still pretty technical, but like I didn't want him to have to suffer every time I updated the Godot game engine, so I made this for you, Josh. You know, I built this tool, and then I also gave it the ability to manage add-ons declaratively, so that when you're working on a Godot project, you're not normally like you'd have to resort to like Git submodules or something really painful. And so I just built like a single, you know, flat graph add-on resolver type thing into it, so you can just write out what add-ons you want in a JSON file, and it'll just install them and resolve the graph and all that stuff, and sort of do it in a sort of optimized way, so that when you change branches, you just run a command and boom, boom, boom. And another thing is like I needed to reuse add-ons between local projects while they were still in development. And so you need symlinks for that and stuff, and that's not easy to do, and that's really not easy to do on Windows, which requires administrator privileges. So I did it for the 3 OSs, and then I had a bunch of help from contributors actually polishing that up for some of the operating systems. So thank you to everyone who contributed to that. Moving up the hierarchy of the pyramid, we've got safety and security, your project structure. So if you want to make anything and reuse it, it probably helps to test it. You know, it's fine if you don't test your game, but if you if you don't test the systems your game is relying on, you know, like if your playback system has no tests or something, that's not necessarily a great thing. And so I was like, okay, I need to be able to run tests inside the engine. And so I created this little utility that just uses a little bit of C# reflection and figures out what tests you want to run and stuff. And it's really simple in theory. And up until very recently, as of like the other day, this was pretty much the only option you had if you wanted to run some sort of semblance of tests inside of Godot with C#. Recently, Mike, who maintains the GD unit project, he's been working on adding C# support. And so he's actually done some nice stuff with the Visual Studio test adapter stuff, which does not come close to. And then this also makes it easy to kind of intercept the command line arguments that Godot gets and sort of run your tests in CI/CD so that you can be sure that your game or your game utility or whatever you're working on actually runs. And then another thing I sort of borrowed from the folks who taught me app development as I know it from work, sort of taught me feature-based file architecture. Of course, they didn't invent this or anything, but the idea is you just have a folder, you know, like if you have a coin in a game, then you have your, you know, script and your scene for it, and then you have your audio and your state and your, you know, visuals, and they're all sort of subfolders of that. So if you wanted to move this coin to another project, you could relatively easily just copy paste the whole folder and all of the stuff inside of it, and then maybe tweak a script or two. And Godot really makes this easy, just the way it's structured. And so if you follow feature-based file architecture and sort of that flat structure where you have a scripts folder and you have a scenes folder, if you sort of invert that and go feature-based, you can have a really pleasant time. Then also when you need to rename something, you don't have to check multiple top-level folders. But anyway, I digress. If you want to run Godot in CI/CD, say to do the testing we talked about, you'll need like a GitHub action for that, and there wasn't one that would run Godot directly on the runner OS. And this is super technical, but if you're like trying to do a Mac OS export, it really helps if you're actually exporting from Mac. You can kind of do it from Linux if you want to suffer, but nobody should do that. And so I wanted to be able to install Godot directly on the runners that GitHub gives you for your actions. And so I built, you know, a utility to do that based off of some other awesome stuff that Paul and some other folks had done. And then going into state management, a lot of this other stuff was already done by the time I tackled state management, so this is a little bit more recent. One of the things is like dependencies. Like I consider like where to get a dependency from and how to get it. I kind of consider that part of like your state. Maybe it's not, but that's just where I threw it in for this presentation. And in Flutter, you would just, have a tree, right? And you would sort of declare, okay, well, this overall page that has all these little tiny widgets inside of it, this is going to provide these values. And then those little tiny widgets inside would just walk up the tree and just find the nearest thing that had it. And it was just simple. It was stupid. It was simple. And algorithmic complexity was on your side, because if you had a very deep tree, it's only going to be the logarithm, if the depth is fairly balanced and stuff. So it was like very nice. And then, I was like, okay, well, let's just do that with Godot, because everything's a node in Godot. And so I was, okay, here we go. And this is the idea. Of course, you have, like essentially scopes based on, the parent hierarchy here. So like sibling A, child, and sibling B all have access to all of the repositories that are provided. And I drew boxes around the scope so you can see it. But it's just dead simple. It's like if you're inside the thing, or descendant, or if your ancestor has what you need, you're fine, type of thing. And so I built this little utility that leverages another utility I wrote, not shown here, and you just slap it on your scripts, and it'll walk up the tree and find what it needs, which is usually a very short distance if you architect your stuff. It's like 1 or 2 hops away usually. And then moving on to the real fun stuff, hierarchical state machines. So if you want to do anything like, I don't know, I guess like somewhat complex, it really helps if you can use a hierarchical state machine of some kind. You might know them as state charts or other terms for them. But the general idea is that state charts let you do what's called coding by delta, which is just essentially a way of saying, okay, if you have one system that does this, you just, for another related state, you might inherit from that state and get all that functionality for free, and then just program in the differences. You might override one behavior here, one input here or something, and then add an additional handler or something, but then you've just basically have very little code because you just borrowed all the functionality from somewhere else. And so coding by delta is a very great way to manage state when you have complex state, because then your code is essentially the smallest amount of code required to solve the task while being in like a human-friendly way of reading it. So you cannot, underestimate the importance of these things. And coding a hierarchical state machine is a little bit challenging if you want it to be easy to use, just in terms of like API and stuff. It kind of really threw me for a bit. But I'd been struggling with state management, so finally I was just like, screw it, I'll sit down and figure this out and try to come up with something that I enjoy. And this was all happening probably between Fishing Game 2 and 3. Maybe there will be a 4 someday, but yeah, anyway. And I knew that whatever I came up with, I wanted it to be very declarative, like this is the state, this is what it handles, this is what it does, like most state machine libraries, like there's nothing special about that. And then I also wanted to leverage C#'s, vanilla functionality, like out of the box as much as possible. C# has interfaces and it's object-oriented, and so if you can leverage a lot of that, people don't have to learn new syntax. They can just learn that it correlates to certain concepts in C# and you're ready to go. So I came up with this little thing called logic blocks, which I based heavily off of Block, which is a Flutter state management library that's one of the most popular ones. And I had the good fortune of working with the creator of that, and he's kind of a friend of mine. And he taught me basically everything I know about app development, so hey, Felix. Block worked great for Flutter, and so I took some of the same ideas and came up with something that ended up being quite different, but a lot of the ideology and like the structure of the APIs and stuff ended up kind of similar. So what this does is should be hopefully it's less scary than maybe other things you've seen. It's kind of verbose because you've got public read-only record structs, which is just an optimization. Like you could do it with less words, but that makes it faster. Ideas, you tell it what your initial state should be, and you just spin one up. And then you have your, this is for a toaster. And so you have your heating state, and it gets the open door input. And when you enter it, it produces an output and turns the heater on. And when you leave the heating state, it turns the heater off. So it's all very simple stuff, right? And the general idea is that with a logic block, it's just a state machine. So you receive inputs. You maintain a single state instance, so there's only one state ever active at once. And then you produce outputs, which are these sort of ephemeral objects that you just are disposable. And if you use structs, they stay on the stack, and you don't have to worry about memory allocation. And they just sort of fire right off to your bindings. And you can just handle them. And that's basically, I renamed these things from state charts, and state charts inputs are called events, but that's confusing because C# has something called events. And then outputs are called actions with state charts, but that's confusing because C# has actions as like delegates, so you don't want that. So I just renamed everything and then kind of change the state chart algorithm ever so slightly to be more intuitive. And then Logic Blocks has a source generator that comes with that will read your code and produce these UML diagrams right next to your code. And when your code changes, the diagram changes. So instead of designing a diagram and having code generated from that and getting out of date, your diagram will never get out of date. And it doesn't show you as much information as the code actually would, but that's the whole point. It can show you in a single picture a rough overview of something that you would normally have to scroll through, and possibly even multiple files if you had lots of states. And so I cannot describe how useful this has been, because this has enabled what I like to call like visual refactoring. If you get your state design wrong, you'll see it. And I did the first time around on a pretty large project. And when I cleaned it up, I actually committed the screenshots to my repository, and I could actually see visually in terms of pictures what I had changed. I was like, yeah, that looks better. It looks correct. And you can just think there's something about the human mind where you're just like, you just kind of know when something is what it should be. Which sounds very woo, but engineering's not all science. So I'm proud of that. And then, here it is for something a little bit more complex, like overall game state, like whether or not you're playing the game, or you won, or you lost, or you're paused, or you're resuming, and handling transitions and stuff like that. And this is taken from a real life use case. And then I'm about to release, version 5 of this little thing, and it'll have boxless input queuing and allocation-free execution if you care. So I'm kind of optimizing it under the hood now that it's been around for a hot second. And then when you're actually using the state machines, it's very simple. You just bind to it, and then you just handle what outputs you care about, and then tell Godot what to do, or manipulate your view code. And this essentially allows you to have very little code in your actual view scripts and keep all your stuff in the state machine. And then your state machine can reference your view script actually backwards by interface, which means you can mock the view and just test your state stuff, and it's pretty cool if you take just a little bit of effort and put it in. And I haven't done serialization, networking, anything more abstract than state management yet. But those are things I'm interested in and kind of exploring for other projects and stuff, but I just haven't gotten to it. And I ended up creating some other utilities that didn't really get featured, like Supernodes is a source generator that lets you sort of have mix-ins, essentially, and that's what auto-inject and the other power-ups sort of leverage. And then, I have a utility package in the Chickensoft website, which is open source. So if you wanted to write a blog and talk about Godot and C#, you could, and I would just merge it in. And so in closing, this is the Chickensoft game demo. I took the GD Quest assets, and they did a great job making all this art and a little demo, and so I sort of rebuilt it all in C#. And I wrote 100% unit test coverage for this game, so this game has like 200 unit tests, just not because you should, but because you can. And so this game has, I think, rather beautiful code, and I'm really proud of it. And it has menus, so you can pause and resume and load, and when you're on the menu screen, you see the world spinning behind it and stuff. So it's like a little bit non-trivial in terms of implementing all that. And one of the moderators in Chickensoft took a look at it, and they said, I think the most impressive thing, besides all the testing stuff, which I can't comment on, but I'm sure it took a lot of hard work, thank you, is how consistent everything is. Every time I have attempted to be extremely consistent, I lock myself into something I end up disliking slightly and then give up. So if you were to look at the code for this, you would find that every little thing, like the mushroom, is implemented in the same way that the coin is, and so on. Of course, they have different state machines. You can see them, and you could see, okay, when the jump, the little mushroom jump shroom, it's idling, or it's loading the mechanism to bounce you, and then it's launching you, and then it's going into cooldown, and you can just see it all happening, and you can see if you got it right while you're coding it. Same thing with the overall app state, the game state from earlier that you saw, that's from this. So the overall app state is different from the game state. The app state's more concerned with which screen you're in. And then, it has a state for whether or not you're in game. And then the game state machine handles all the stuff for inside the actual game. And so, if you structure things and put a little thought into it, you can leverage pictures like this and see what you're doing. And so this is what I'm trying to say. Hey, there's actually a viable alternative out there to using proprietary tools. You can use Godot and C#, whereas you may not need Unity as much as you think you do in 2024. And you can leverage a lot of this stuff to create game code bases that are really, a pleasure to work in. Or at least I think so. And I think we're getting there quick. And that's it. That's my show. Thank you, everyone. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer questions or just talk more.
So this is from someone who basically went from 3.5 to 4.0, everything broke, and I got so scared that I stopped using Godot for about a year. So I'm just imagining, like, this sort of system can just really easily let you upgrade from different Godot versions without like worrying that much, and that just feels really cool to me. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I understand your frustration with upgrade cycles with Godot. Like I said, they're very aggressive, and they're fixing C# integration bugs constantly, which has forced me to stay on the bleeding edge. And so while working on this project, I upgraded it 3 times on engine versions. One time I did have to kind of rework some of the boilerplate files because of Godot glitches and stuff. But for the most part, I just changed a few versions here, and here, and updated the APIs, and it just worked. And I try to, when I'm designing public APIs for consumption, I'm really careful to sort of not use the engine as much as possible. So if I'm, making something like the test runner, for example, it's very loosely coupled to Godot. There's only a few points of interaction between it and the engine. So if Godot were to majorly change some stuff, I would relatively easily be able to update that, and I have in the past when they've done major updates. And so, yeah, I don't want to create tools that force you to use a specific engine version. I want to be able to keep them on the bleeding edge. I don't have time to be able to maintain past versions anyway and do cherry picking and all that release stuff. I'm not even experienced with that. And so I'm just trying to keep the tools on the latest version and keep that rolling forward. And to that end, I'm trying to make it easy for people to stay up to date. So hopefully this would help, theoretically.
Cool. I have a question from Drum in chat. They were looking at if they were creating a test and testing a vertical slice of their game, would you recommend following these standards, being one of your previous slides? Like you had a slide versus game testing standards. It was mildly far back, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I won't try to find it. So to answer that, it's a lot easier to do something this bold or brave or stupid, whatever you want to call it, when you're starting the project. You can refactor into this sort of opinionated architecture, and this demo's online. I want you and everyone else to go play with it and look at it and learn from it if you can, or contribute to it, or help me find better ways to do things. And it's very difficult if you have a large project that's tightly coupled and your architecture graph is a web of connections. You probably would know if you're in that position what you need to do. But I would say if you're going to start a new game or you're early on, I have known several people in the Discord that took a look at this and were like, wow, I really like this. This sounds fun and it's nice, it's consistent. And several people have already refactored their projects to be a lot like this. And apparently they're having a good time. But this is all very recent, so it could take years to tell if this is any good.
So as someone that has tried to do a lot of the things that you did architecturally and philosophically with Chickensoft,
Chicken shit.
in GDScript for my own projects, I definitely feel a lot of the pain that comes with trying to build tooling and game at the same time, and that actually led me eventually to focusing less on the tooling side and more on the game side for my own project, and that's probably a talk in and of itself because that was not a decision I made lightly. But I definitely want to commend you for the effort being put into this and making this consistent, because that is damned hard to do. And honestly, in thinking about it while you were giving this talk, I think one of the key components is your community that allows you to source a lot of good ideas, and so that it's not just one person trying to think of the best architecture, because as someone that has been in that position, it's also really hard to do that. So just props, and also really good talk.
Thank you, Josh. That means a lot coming from you. And I, like you said, the community, I learned a lot of stuff from them. These were Godot veterans. So one of them is very hard to please and is a really great game developer with a lot of experience. And so I learned a lot about, like, don't have excess memory allocations, or no C# developer is going to use your stuff, and things like that. And so that's, you know, been on my mind after I learned all that. I learned a bunch of stuff from them. They've taught me tremendously. Another area where I totally cheated is, unlike GD script, doing all this would be much harder. C# has source generators and this amazing ecosystem of tooling. You're standing on the weight of Microsoft behind you. You have world-class enterprise tools behind you. I could not imagine doing something like this with GD script. You have to have enterprise tooling to make this possible.
I'll repeat for the audience on YouTube. It would be interesting at some point for me, at least personally, to do a comparison of what I tried to do and have been trying to do through GD script to what you've done with C#, and just see how much easier the ecosystem of C# is to make those things work, like you said.
Yes, and it should be even easier now, hopefully. So at least that's the goal anyway. Thank you.
Last call for questions.
Trying to think how to ask this. How do you know when you? Okay, let me ask it this way. So like, what's like the oldest tool, like something from a few years ago that you made? Like, can you think of something?
Yes, they're deprecated. I ended up
okay.
replacing them with other tools. I rebuilt the dependency injection system and the state machines many, many times. And what I have now is working well, but it's based off a lot of failures in design where I just didn't think through the whole problem space and came up with systems that were just overcomplicated and not useful. And so those have been deprecated, and a lot of what you see is the survivors. So, you know, if I have the 15 open source projects, not even all of them are mine. We've inherited one from the community. But yeah, a lot of this, there's probably 100 things total that I've made that just never saw the light of day, or just were a sandbox project for a day or two. And yeah.
What makes you start a new tool, like a new tool to use?
It has to do with like the background with the enterprise app development, where we used the layered architecture, and we had, you know, really thoughtful people who put a lot of thought into us developing apps painlessly. And it was such a good development experience when I was a developer before I transitioned to engineering management. And I really liked that. And so I expected a lot of those things to just exist when I started doing C#. But C# people have a very different way of doing things. So the way I do C# is essentially very unorthodox. Like, I'm probably, C# people would probably want to kill me if they saw this. And like, just even the code style alone, where I put the braces on the same line, like that's, you know, I don't think you can do that. And so, yeah, so every time I needed something, I would be like, why isn't this there? And you know, you don't know you're innovating when you're in the moment. You're just like, I need this thing. Where is it? And so you make it.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like you've grown in wisdom of like knowing what tools are worth making?
No.
Okay.
No,
cool.
I still make useless stuff.
It doesn't
all the
get
time.
any easier.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure there'll be a fish game 4, 5, 6, and so on too. Anything else, or am I done? All right. Thank you all so much for listening. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Well, with that, folks, I will say we're going to bring the meeting to an end here, and then we're going to proceed to some other location to get food. Head count. Okay. Well, for the stream, thank you guys for hanging out with us online. We're gonna go ahead and close out the stream here, and the rest of us in person are gonna go get some food somewhere. Have a great night.